Imagine waking up one day and realizing that you are not who you thought you were. That everything defining you, your tastes, fears, relationships, even your automatic reactions, has been shaped by hidden forces within you. Now tell me, what if you discovered that deep within your mind, there is someone else, a stranger who has been influencing every one of your decisions? This is not science fiction. It is reality, according to Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. I spent 30 days immersing myself in his thoughts, exploring concepts like the collective unconscious, the shadow, archetypes, and the process of individuation. And let me tell you, it changed my life in ways I never imagined. But before we continue, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt that there is a part of you that you don't understand? That part that acts on impulse, sometimes sabotages your plans or makes you repeat the same mistakes. Has this happened to you? Because today, we are going to explore why this happens and how we can start to truly understand ourselves. Jung said that the human mind is like an iceberg. The visible part, our consciousness, is only a small fraction of who we really are. Beneath that surface lies the unconscious, a deep dimension containing everything we have repressed, forgotten, or never come to know about ourselves. Interestingly, this unconscious is not just individual. It is also collective. There are patterns of thought and behavior that we share with all of humanity, images and symbols that appear in myths, dreams, and cultures around the world. Jung called these archetypes. They are like psychological molds that influence our view of the world. There is a hero in our minds, a sage, an eternal child, a stern father, a protective mother, and also a shadow, that dark part of us that we prefer to ignore. Here is where things get interesting. Jung spoke of the shadow as the part of our psyche that contains everything we reject about ourselves. These are forbidden desires, shameful, fears and emotions we repress to fit into society. But here is the problem. What we ignore does not disappear. It manifests in other ways. How many times have you reacted in a way that you later cannot explain? Have you felt irrational jealousy, disproportionate anger, or an uncontrollable desire to sabotage yourself? That is the shadow acting. And the worst part is that if we do not confront it, it controls us without our realizing it. In my experience, the first days studying Jung were like looking into a mirror that I did not want to see. I realized that many of my reactions were being influenced by past wounds, by beliefs that I had adopted without questioning, and the same happens to all of us. Jung had a proposal to get out of this trap, the process of individuation. It is the path to becoming who we truly are, instead of living as a mask that pleases others. And the key is to integrate our shadow, not repress it. This does not mean giving in to our darkest impulses, but recognizing them, understanding them, and learning to live with them. Only when we accept all our parts, the light and the shadows, can we find balance. What if I told you that the part of you that you fear the most is also the key to your growth? Most people spend their lives avoiding looking within. It is uncomfortable, even terrifying. But what we ignore does not disappear. It just hides, waiting for the perfect moment to manifest. In the first part, we talked about the shadow, that hidden part of our psyche where our repressed emotions, inconfessable desires, and unresolved wounds are stored. Today, we will explore something deeper. How to face our shadow and start integrating it into our lives without letting it destroy us in the process. The shadow does not show itself obviously. If it were easy to recognize, we would all be fully aware of our own contradictions. In reality, the shadow disguises itself. It hides in what Jung called projection, the psychological mechanism by which we attribute to others what we deny in ourselves. Have you ever been bothered by someone for no apparent reason? Have you felt an immediate rejection of someone without really knowing them? Often, this happens because that person reflects something of our own shadow that we do not want to see. The person who irritates you with their arrogance perhaps shows you a repressed desire to express more confidence in yourself. The one you criticize for being too emotional might reflect your own difficulty in accepting your feelings. The D person you envy could be showing you a potential that you have denied in yourself. When we understand this, every interaction becomes an opportunity to know ourselves better. Instead of reacting automatically, we can ask ourselves, why does this affect me so much? What part of myself am I seeing reflected in this person? Accepting our shadow is not something that happens overnight. It requires courage, because it means facing everything we have denied for years. Jung said that individuation is a process of transformation that can feel like a symbolic death. Because to become who we truly are, we must first let go of the identity that has kept us trapped. Here are some ways we can begin this process. Observe our extreme reactions. Every time something provokes an intense reaction, whether it is anger, envy, or fear, it is a clue that we are seeing our shadow in action. Instead of justifying the emotion, we can ask ourselves, what part of me is reacting here? Am I projecting something onto this person or situation? Write about our repressed fears and desires. Often, we do not know what is in our shadow until we actively explore it. Keeping a journal where we write without filters about what we truly feel can reveal aspects of ourselves that we have been ignoring. Review our dreams. Jung believed that dreams are messages from the unconscious. Dark figures, chaotic scenarios, or unknown characters can represent aspects of our shadow seeking recognition. Keeping a dream journal and analyzing them can help us understand what our psyche is trying to tell us. Accept that we are not just good or bad. One of the reasons the shadow is so hard to accept is because it clashes with the image we want to have of ourselves. If we consider ourselves good people, we do not want to admit that we can also be selfish, envious, or manipulative. But integrating the shadow means recognizing that we are complex beings, full of light and shadows. The goal of facing the shadow is not to get stuck in it, but to free ourselves from its control. When we stop running from our repressed aspects, we begin to approach what Jung called the self, our most authentic being, the totality of who we truly are. Here is where the concept of individuation comes in. It is not about becoming someone perfect, but someone complete. In the next part, we will explore how the integration of the shadow leads to profound transformation and how this process impacts our relationships with others. But before we continue, tell me in the comments, what do you think is in your own shadow? Is there something that you always feel you repress or do not allow yourself to express? I want to know your perspective before we continue exploring this journey together. What if I told you that everything you have repressed, your fears, your most inconfessable desires, even your darkest side, is not your enemy, but a source of power? Carl Jung affirmed that true transformation only occurs when we stop dividing ourselves into good and bad people, when we accept that within us there is light and darkness, and that only by integrating both can we find balance. When we talk about integrating the shadow, we do not mean acting impulsively or letting our repressed parts dominate our lives. Nor does it mean justifying destructive behaviors with the excuse of, "This is who I am." Integrating the shadow means recognizing those hidden aspects and understanding how they can serve us instead of sabotaging us. Jung said that in the shadow, there are also valuable aspects of our personality that have been repressed for cultural or family reasons. Perhaps as a child, you were told that being very expressive was immature, so you repressed your spontaneity. Or maybe you were taught that showing ambition was selfish, so you learned to minimize your own desires. Here is a fundamental key. Not everything in the shadow is negative. It also contains skills, passions, and talents that we have blocked out of fear of judgment. So, integrating the shadow is a process of rescue, a journey in which we recover parts of ourselves that we thought were lost. To understand what this looks like in real life, let's look at some examples. Fear of confrontation. If you always avoid conflicts because you fear being perceived as aggressive, your shadow may contain a strength that you have not yet reclaimed. The ability to set boundaries. Integrating it does not mean becoming violent, but learning to say what you think without fear. Envy as a guide. Instead of seeing envy as something shameful, we can use it as a clue to what we really want. Sometimes, we envy people who show us a part of ourselves that we have denied. If you feel envy of someone who travels the world, perhaps your shadow contains a repressed desire for adventure. Repressed anger. Many people repress their anger because they associate it with loss of control. But well-channeled anger can transform into a powerful energy for change. If we learn to listen to our anger instead of repressing it, we can use it as fuel to set boundaries or drive important projects. The key here is to convert the energy of the shadow into something constructive instead of letting it control us from the shadows. One of the signs that we are integrating our shadow is when our reactions to others change. Before, we harshly criticize someone without realizing that the criticism revealed something about ourselves. After, instead of reacting automatically, we use that discomfort as an opportunity for self-exploration. Integrating the shadow allows us to relate to others from a more authentic and less reactive place. For example, if someone irritates you because they are extremely confident, instead of rejecting them immediately, you could ask yourself, why? Does this bother me so much? Is it possible that there is a part of me that wishes to express myself with more confidence? When we ask these kinds of questions, little by little, we stop being slaves to our projections and begin to see others with more clarity. The shadow not only affects our relationship with ourselves, but also with our partners, friends, and family. Often, what attracts us to another person is what we have repressed in ourselves. This is the origin of many dynamics of attraction and conflict in relationships. For example, if you are a very rational person, you might feel attracted to someone emotional and spontaneous. This person represents a part of you that you have repressed. At first, this can seem fascinating, but if you do not integrate your own ability to feel and express emotions, over time you might feel frustrated with that same characteristic in the other person. If you consider yourself a good and correct person, you might feel attracted to someone who represents rebellion and freedom. But if you do not integrate your own desire to be freer, you might end up criticizing that person for the same reasons that initially attracted you. Jung said that many relationships fail because people expect their partner to return the lost parts of themselves, instead of doing the work of integration on their own. How do we know we are integrating our shadow? It is not an instantaneous process, but there are some signs that we are advancing on the path of individuation. We react with less intensity to others. What used to deeply bother us starts to lose its power over us. We know ourselves better and accept ourselves more. We stop acting out of fear of judgment and start expressing our authenticity. Our relationships improve. We stop projecting our shadows onto others and learn to relate more consciously. We feel more energy and creativity. By recovering repressed parts of ourselves, we feel more alive. Who are you really when you stop identifying with what others expect of you? Carl Jung affirmed that the true goal of life is not superficial happiness, but individuation, the process of becoming our authentic self, our most complete and genuine version. But what does it really mean to connect with the self? How can we know if we are on the right path? In this part of the video, we will explore the meaning of the self, its relationship with the unconscious, and why many people never manage to discover it. Jung describes the self as the core of our psyche, the totality of who we really are, beyond our conscious personality. It is the union of our rational mind with our emotions, our intuition, and our unconscious energies. Unlike the ego, which is the part of our mind that gives us identity and helps us interact with the world, the self is deeper. It is the force that guides us toward our true purpose. When we are not connected with ourself, we feel that something is missing in our life. We can be successful in the outer world, but feel empty. We can follow all the rules of society, but find no satisfaction. That is why Jung believed that individuation, the process of connecting with ourself, is the true purpose of life. Many people go through life trapped in an identity that does not belong to them. This happens when we ignore our unconscious, when we repress our shadow, and when we live under the expectations of others. Some signs that we are disconnected from the self include a constant feeling of emptiness or dissatisfaction. Nothing seems to be enough. We always feel that something is missing. Repetition of the same harmful patterns, toxic relationships, self-sabotage, fear of change, fear of solitude and silence. Because being with ourselves confronts us with uncomfortable questions, feeling like we are acting instead of living, as if we are playing a role instead of being ourselves. If any of these signs resonate with you, do not worry. It does not mean that something is wrong with you, but that your unconscious is trying to send you a message. The path to individuation is not linear. It is not a destination, but a continuous process of self-discovery. Here are some ways we can begin to connect with ourself. Listen to our emotions, not just our rational mind. The self does not communicate only through logical thoughts. It expresses itself in our emotions, in our intuition, in what we feel in the body. If something generates constant anxiety, sadness, or frustration, it could be a sign that we are not aligned with what we truly want. Explore our dreams and personal symbols. Jung affirmed that the unconscious speaks to us through symbols. Dreams, synchronicities, and even the images that catch our attention can contain messages about our true path. Keeping a dream journal and analyzing their meanings can help us understand what our psyche is trying to show us. Stop living according to others' expectations. Often, what we think we want is not really our desire, but something we have learned from our family, society, or culture. Asking questions like, "Is this really what I want, or is it what I have been taught to want?" can help us separate our authentic voice from external influences. Accept change and uncertainty. Connecting with the self means being willing to change, to let go of parts of ourselves that no longer serve us. This can be scary because it means letting go of a familiar identity to discover who we truly are. But Jung said that transformation only occurs when we are willing to face uncertainty. The process of individuation is not easy. There are moments when we feel like we are losing control, like our identity is crumbling. This is normal. Jung described this process as a symbolic death. The old ego must die for something new to be born. And this can feel like a crisis, like a period of confusion and chaos. But here is the key. Chaos is not the end of the path, but the beginning of transformation. Every time we go through an identity crisis, we are closer to discovering who we truly are. Every time we face a repressed part of ourselves, we free ourselves a little more. And in the end, what we find is not an idealized version of ourselves, but something much more powerful, an authenticity that does not depend on external validation, a peace that comes from knowing that we are on the right path. We have taken a deep journey through the shadow, projections, and the encounter with the self. But now we come to the final question, the most important of all. Carl Jung affirmed that few people reach this point because individuation is a process that demands courage. It is not just about knowing ourselves better, but about transforming our lives from that inner truth. In this final part, we will explain how it feels to live from the self, what changes occur in our relationships, and what challenges we face when being authentic in a world that often pushes us to be the opposite. When we have finally integrated our shadow and encountered ourself, something changes within us at a deep level. Decisions become clearer. We no longer just go with what we should do, but with what truly resonates with our essence. Relationships change. We stop attracting people and situations that reinforce our wounds and start connecting with people who accept us for who we truly are. Our fear of judgment decreases. Not because we do not care at all about what others think, but because we understand that our life cannot revolve around pleasing others. A deeper sense of purpose emerges. It does not mean that everything becomes easy or that we have all the answers, but we feel that we are on the right path. It is as if, after years of walking in the fog, we can finally see clearly. But this awakening is not always well received by the outside world. Some people may distance themselves. When we change, our environment may resist. Those who are used to our previous version may feel uncomfortable with our authenticity. There will be moments of doubt, not because we do not know who we are, but because the world bombards us with distractions and expectations. The shadow remains present. Integrating it does not mean it disappears, but that we now know how to manage it. We still have moments of insecurity, anger, and fear, but they no longer control us. Jung said that individuation is not a final destination, but a continuous process. There is no point at which we say, "Done, I am now completely myself." There are always deeper layers to explore. Living authentically in a world that does not always allow it. Here is where the real challenge appears. Being authentic in a world that constantly pressures us to fit in is not easy. We live in a society that tells us who we should be, how we should dress, what we should do with our lives, what we should think. But when we live from the self, we stop being puppets of those expectations. We learn to say no without guilt. We surround ourselves with people who truly nourish us. We find paths that fulfill us, instead of just following what others say is success. And above all, we stop seeing life as a series of boxes to check and start living it for real. Carl Jung left us a powerful tool for understanding ourselves: depth psychology. He taught us that within each of us, there is much more than we think. That the unconscious is not our enemy, but our greatest ally. And that integrating what we deny in ourselves does not destroy us, but liberates us. If there is one thing I want you to remember from this video, it is this: your journey of self-discovery does not end here. This is just the beginning. Every day is an opportunity to discover more about yourself, to look beyond the surface and ask yourself, am I living a life that truly belongs to me? Am I letting fear control me? Am I listening to my intuition, or just following what others expect of me? These questions keep us awake. They lead us to a deeper level of consciousness. A new chapter in your journey. I want you to tell me in the comments, after this video, what resonates with you the most? What do you think is the next step in your individuation journey? And if you want to continue exploring depth psychology, the unconscious, interpersonal relationships, and the human mind, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here we continue to unravel the mysteries of the human psyche. See you in the next video. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep awakening.